Reading from 10 Years of Pain, continuing the chapter. Well, this will be chapter 11 in the sequence of this YouTube videos, but it's continuing to read the chapter called Accidents and Errors. And because this is such an entertaining chapter, I'm going to pour myself a little shot and just sip it. And then continue to read. In the very early period of Pain Solution, I participated in a fire show with Teater X. We were presenting it at the Olympic Torch, as the Olympic Torch was passing through Oslo before the Lillehammer Winter Games in 1994. This was the first time my parents came to see me perform. And at an early stage in the show, I did a solo routine, swinging fire torches. At the end of my routine, I was supposed to blow fire out of my mouth. The temperature was below 15 Celsius, minus 15 Celsius, that is, and caused my nose to be blocked. I was sure I could hold my breath to the end of my act, but I could not. As my body reacted to the lack of oxygen, I drew my breath in a reflex. The result was that I got the mouthful of paraffin into my lungs. I felt a sudden and sharp pain in my chest, as if I had swallowed a block of ice. I had a few minutes to gain control over my coughing and find a way to breathe without starting to cough again, while the others did a routine. I managed to hold myself together and control my breath and the pain in order to complete the performance. I even did my fire eating act, although it was a bit scary. After we had finished, my father took me straight to the emergency room. I keep calling it like the first aid station. I don't know where that came from. The emergency room, which in turn sent me to the hospital. And I was hospitalized for 10 days with a chemical pneumonia. The first 48 hours in hospital was a nightmare of pain. It hurt to breathe, and I had to concentrate on pulling the air into and pushing it out of my lungs. It did not seem to happen automatically. I was afraid that if I would not be able to breathe, I was afraid that I would not be able to breathe if I dozed off. The last days in hospital, I was free to sleep at home. I only had to be there during the day to get my doses of antibiotics and medicine. And without letting anyone know, except Monica, who was strongly against it, I gave a performance while still under treatment, basically still hospitalized, but with the liberty to go home at night. And of course, the mother of my children was like, "Don't do it, you got fucking paraffin, flammable liquid down your lungs, and you're going to perform doing fire." Yeah, dude, we need this money for paying rent. So the only change I made to the show was actually to blow less fire than I normally would have done. Otherwise, I did the same. And needless to say, after this accident, now I'm just off on a limb here. This is not in the book, but obviously my whole family was totally against me continuing my line of work, doing fire performances, because it's too dangerous. But analyzing what had happened, I knew exactly why this accident happened. So I knew that in any future scenario, I will spit the flammable liquid out of my mouth and lose the fire breathing rather than risking to inhale it again, because that was very, very painful. I'll just show you a couple of pictures before I continue reading. This is Roberto setting fire to his hair. That was not an accident though, that was planned, and it was a very well executed hair burn. And then this is me from a Halloween special, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde themed performance. There's another picture. And then there is another accident. Actually, there's a little bit more to the lung thing. Against all the odds, I fully recovered and my lung capacity is back at nearly 100%. Examples of similar incidents show that chemical pneumonia often leads to asthma or other chronic chest issues. And now, the most recent and a very embarrassing mistake happened in Croatia. I was invited to participate in the Festival of New Art in Rijeka with my performance Drops. Remember the Chinese torture? Only a few hours before presenting the work, I realized that I had forgotten my hooks, piercing needles, and sutures in Oslo. These were all important ingredients in the performance. Finding these objects within 2 hours on a Sunday in a city where I had no connections was an impossible task. I could not believe how I had managed to be so stupid. I had remembered everything else. And I was completely stressed out and keeping asking the organizers of the festival if there was a piercing studio in town, where was the pharmacy, or if they knew a fisherman. None of those would actually be of much help anyway. Fortunately, Christiane, my assistant and also partner at that time, kept calm and figured out how to solve the problem with a sewing needle and thread, which was not at all hard to find. It took a bit more effort to sew my mouth shut without the sutures, and to stitch the chains to my head rather than using the hooks. But Christiane did it perfectly. We did manage to get ready in time, and the performance was successful. So you see, for those of you who don't know this, sutures, they are made to go through your skin. The skin is very tough. So a regular sewing needle is very hard to push through living skin, while the suture needle is shaped in a way that it cuts its way through. So that was a bit of a challenge. And now, the next. In the performance, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Head, I had decided to include a little gag when I presented it at SAFT in Fredrikstad. I stapled a piece of thin paper to my chest as a napkin before eating fire out of a bowl using a spoon. During the eating session, the napkin accidentally caught on fire, and that was the gag. The mistake was that the paper I had used had some sort of coating which melted and made it stick to my chest as it burned. So my reaction to the accident was real, and the result was a large second-degree burn on my chest. You can see it there. When presenting The Hanged Man in Trondheim, a performance based on a body suspension by the knees, I had been sloppy on checking my equipment properly. The rings on the hooks were underdimensioned. This resulted in them breaking in the moment most of my body had been hoisted off of the floor. Only my neck and shoulders were still on the ground, and my knees were in the air as the rings broke. And pieces of metal flew in all directions. I fell to the floor. It's hard to say who was more shocked, the audience, my crew, or myself. No one knew what had actually happened until we got an overview, and all of us assumed it was the skin that had ripped. I called for a timeout, replaced the rings with proper sized ones, and continued the show from where it had gone wrong. Just a little quick mention of script here is like, every time there has been an accident, an error, or any mistake on stage, which there has been also since this time happened, the show has always been concluded, finished, wrapped up, and then emergency room or whichever first aid, anything that needs to be taken care of has been taken care of after the show is done and the bow has been taken and the applause acknowledged. Now this one. In the presentation of Floating in Air at M3 Paint Studios, my friend and colleague Gordon, alias Max Normal, had the task of inserting 12 large hooks in my back and legs. His only previous experience with piercing was that he once before had tried to insert hooks in my back. We did not use piercing needles, which we normally would, and the hooks we had to pierce through my skin were not properly sharpened. Upon attempting to insert the first hook, both of us realized this was going to be a lot harder than expected. Gordon struggled to get the hook into my back, and I stood there trying to think of a solution. But the only way to continue the performance was to use raw power and force the blunt hooks into my back. For a moment I feared that he would give up, but he finally managed, and as he went along he got the hang of it, and he got all the hooks in place. Just 10 minutes behind schedule, I was ready to be suspended, and we completed the show successfully. These are only some of the accidents and errors that have occurred over the years. Luckily, there have been few serious accidents, and most of the mistakes only happens once. Shit happens, and the show must go on. Let's see. Yeah, this next chapter here is only like half a page, so we'll get through that before calling a break. This next chapter is called Up to Date. I do not think I have become that much better at selling myself, but I am certainly making more effort in getting gigs abroad. Norway is becoming too small. I feel that Pain Solution has reached a level where I'm ready to conquer new territories. I am keeping my part-time jobs for a while longer, even if times have changed for the better during the past year. I still need some time to pay off both my personal and Pain Solutions debts. I get bookings for gigs more frequently again, and recently I have made several new shows. I have recovered my inspiration and my confidence in Pain Solution. I have the best assistant in Christiane, who participates when I perform body suspensions, but is also of great help in the creative process of making new pieces, besides being the woman I love. This book is the milestone at the end of the first decade. May the next 10 years be as productive as the past 10 have been. My aim is to learn as much in the future as I have learned from the past, to continue developing my talent and improve my skill. I will work for the further progression of Pain Solution and never cease to search for new challenges. And then, very pretentious comment at the end here. I have mentioned elsewhere in this book that my ambition is to become one of the best in my genre. I cannot be the judge of that, but I am definitely on my way. So, safe to say that I had regained my confidence at that point. There's another picture. More pages are falling out of this book. So, while promoting this book and encouraging you to get it for free if you buy any of the other books that we have published, it's a great coffee table book, even though it falls apart. But you could also very easily take a page out and frame it and hang that on your wall as a picture. And there's several of them. So there. Yep. Okay. The next chapter, which will follow in the next chapter, is the Appendix 1